Tessa Kelly.
Or maybe it's fine.
Better?
Yep. Hi, I'm going to show you my thesis project. I just graduated from the Harvard Graduate School of Design with a master's in architecture, and the project is called Projective Preservation and the Small American City. I'm going to start by giving you a brief history of different theorists of preservation before I get into my own project. The first of whom is John Ruskin, who started thinking about preservation after the Industrial Revolution, and he thought about architecture as history. So for him, to alter or preserve a building in any way was to destroy history. Next came Viollet-le-Duc, who was much more interested in the moment of the modern intervention and the way that that kind of communicated with the original structure. So you can see in these two drawings of his the way he combines the modern with the old. This is Caesar Brandy, who mostly deals with art restoration, and he, you can see in these paintings here that he tries to not allow the marks of time to disturb the representation of the original work, but to mark what is different and old. And finally, we have Rem Koolhaas, who's an architect, who's the first theorist of preservation who's interested in destruction, and thinking about ways that preservation could be not as subjective in nature. Okay, so my site is Pittsfield. This is a collage of North Street done at the turn of the century. And I'm going to give you a kind of brief overview of this sort of system of preservation that I devised and the way it could be implemented in the city of Pittsfield. So what I did first is to look at the place and think about moments in time that kind of had the most, the kind of biggest impact on the place. And the four that I chose for Pittsfield are the Mohican Indians, the paper and textile mills, 19th century authors, and GE. So what I did was I made maps of the city of Pittsfield, looked at through the lens of these four groups, and marked the sites that were critical to each of those groups on the map. So the first one you see here is the Mohicans, and we have various hunting grounds, burial grounds. Okay, we have the 19th century authors, Herman Melville's home, sites where Oliver Wendell Holmes, Thoreau, all of these people wrote, and then finally electricity. We have the GE plant at Morningside, and we have this electrical testing facility right over the border in Lenox. So then what I tried to do was look at each of these groups and try to distill kind of the way each of these groups understood themselves in relationship to place or nature or the world. So this is a drawing of the Mohican settlements. Mohican means the river Indians. So they relied on the river to move throughout Pittsfield. There were only 80 of them who lived in the whole city. So what I'm proposing here is this idea of a dispersed elementary school where preservation functions by the children kind of moving throughout nature as a way of learning and relating to place in a new way. The second is the mills, and I was very interested in the smokestacks because they exist as kind of an interesting tool for having a new perspective on the city through height. And what I proposed is to embed these staircases up into the smokestacks, which are no longer functioning, as a way of providing and then punching windows that provide these different views as you move down the stack. The story of the mills throughout the city unfolds, and chronologically you get to see the sites where all of the mills were throughout the city. The third is the writers. So we have the original sites of the 5 authors, and then we have these sort of satellites moving around them. And what I did, so with each of the groups, I tried to think about at what scale the preservation would function. So for the authors, it was a very individual thing. So what I did was to kind of, so this is Arrowhead. This is Herman Melville's house, and the black part is his study, which is where he wrote Moby Dick. So what I did was to kind of section out the piece of each house that was critical and then turn it into a little writer's retreat for one person that could kind of move throughout the city. And so new writers could have kind of position themselves and have new views throughout the landscape. And these are the pieces of all 5 of the houses. So we have Holmes, Melville, Thoreau. Okay, and then we have GE, where the scale is enormous, and I was fascinated by this testing grounds over the border in Lenox. And I was thinking about how GE kind of brings up an interesting question of man's relationship to nature, in the sense that GE has kind of left this legacy of pollution in Pittsfield, and I was thinking about the intervention here being this kind of long cut in the earth where you kind of move along through this cut and can observe on either side of you the different layers of soil, and then you kind of come into this encounter with the river. So this is a model of that. This is the cut kind of moving underneath these electrical infrastructure, and then you have this kind of new frame, and then you come out right at the river. So this was my project, and I think the final image we're going to see here is all of the different sites that are involved in telling all of these stories. And the sites, what is great about it is that the sites already exist and the stories already exist. And my project was all about trying to find ways to make them relevant to contemporary life, or to try to figure out how people in Pittsfield today could engage with these stories in a new way.